The vision is that by allowing our partner growers in Kenya and all over the world to tap into the carbon credit value, then instantly industrial hemp becomes potentially the most profitable crop they can grow.
That's Gary Byrnes. He's the CEO of Tao Climate. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today I'm going to be talking to Gary Byrnes about Tao Climate, what it is, how it works, how they got started, how they were selected to be part of the Google Startups for Sustainability program, and how hemp ties into their overall plan to remove 23 gigatons of carbon from the atmosphere. All that and more after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you in part by Amerishawn Cast Hemp, Pennsylvania's leading hempcrete builder and installer. Just wanted to give you a heads up about a 2-day hands-on hempcrete workshop that they are hosting at the shop up there in Bartow, Pennsylvania. It's in conjunction with All Together Now, Pennsylvania. It's May 6th and May 7th. You will learn a lot. You will get your hands dirty. It's going to be awesome. Go to alltogethernowpa.org to learn more. This episode is brought to you in part by I&D Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where they believe in the goodness of hemp. I&D Hemp is a family-owned, mission-driven, and environmentally focused industrial hemp food, feed, and fiber company, providing new opportunities for farmers and rural communities. Their mission is to provide innovative agricultural products and services to connect American farmers with the pioneers and businesses that see hemp as a way to bring real and lasting change to our communities and planet. Learn more at indhemp.com. Alrighty, welcome back to today's show. Thank you for listening. So here we are. It's the third week of March. We just crossed over the spring equinox, and spring is officially here. So much to be thankful for. The weather's getting nice. I actually planted some peas in my garden just the other day. On last week's show, I mentioned that I was getting sick and I had something weird going on with my voice. Well, it turned out to be COVID, and I've been quarantining here back in my old studio for the past week. So that's fun. But I'm looking forward to getting back out into the world again. Anyway, I think you're really going to enjoy today's show. It's a great conversation with Gary Byrnes. We talk about all kinds of stuff as it relates to hemp and climate change and carbon. And I will say that this interview is a little longer than my normal conversations, so I'm going to skip over the news nugget section that's normally here in this part of the show. I will have some updates for you after the interview, so I'll catch up with you at the end of the show. Gary Byrnes, CEO of Tao Climate, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Eric. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. So I wonder if we could start with a very brief introduction.
Sure. Hi, I'm Gary Byrnes. I'm the CEO and founder of Tao Climate and our operational business, which is at hempoffset.com. My background is in technology. I've worked for a variety of software and technology companies, both Irish and American, in recent years. And I've taken that experience into a genuinely purpose-driven enterprise. So the purpose of what we're doing now is to build technology, primarily a software platform that will bring all the different value creators along the hemp and carbon life cycles together so that we can come together and literally solve the climate crisis.
Right. Good. We need folks like you in the world doing this, Gary.
Yes, and the thing is, Eric, there are so many people actually literally in the field and also building out of hemp fiber that we feel that there's a real opportunity to help bring them all together, focused on this single critical goal, and to make it easier for them then to tap into the carbon value of their crops and of their hempcrete products by selling those carbon credit values to the industries that need them. Everyone from big tech to aviation to individual consumers, they're all crying out for high quality carbon credits,
Right.
and there's very limited availability. So that's the problem we want to solve.
Right. Well, that sounds like a worthy endeavor. Can you tell me about the business?
Yes. Our business is headquartered in Ireland, but we have links with hemp growers and makers worldwide. So Tao Climate is our master brand, which is essentially all about rebalancing our relationship with the sun. And carbon dioxide have come to upset that balance with potential significant downsides for the entire human race coming on fast. So we want to rebalance our relationship with the sun by taking vast quantities of CO2 from the air and sequestering that carbon in sustainable construction materials. So our operational brand to accomplish this is hempoffset.com. So hemp offset is really about using the power of industrial hemp to capture vast quantities of CO2 everywhere in the world and then convert that hemp carbon fiber into primarily hempcrete, but other
Other
materials
products, yeah.
also. Because hempcrete then has the ability to sequester the carbon for hundreds of years, and through a process called carbonation, it actually continues to absorb CO2 from the air. So
Right.
it's a
It's amazing.
win-win.
Yeah.
And then by using the problem of carbon in the air to actually build sustainable housing and sustainable infrastructure worldwide, essentially we want to use one problem to solve another. So it actually turns into a win-win-win. And industrial hemp is the most amazing tool that we have to solve this problem really, really quickly, because the scale of the problem is potentially going to get out of control unless we take some very strong actions very, very quickly. And from our analysis, from our research, we believe that industrial hemp is actually the only tool which can help us to solve this problem as quickly as it needs to be solved.
Okay. So I read a press release a few weeks ago, and that's what, sort of initiated my reaching out to you. And it talked about Dow Climate looking for investment to complete this cutting edge technology with their pilot program in Kenya. So what
Yes.
is this cutting edge technology? And then tell me about the project in Kenya.
Yes, the technology is primarily software based, which will enable anybody involved in the hemp value chain, from the grower through to the maker to the builder with the hempcrete materials, to measure their inputs and measure their outputs. So we want to make it really easy for people to see the carbon gains around the different activities. At the moment, the whole verification and validation and certification around carbon credits is very complex and cumbersome and expensive. So our technology will make it very, very easy to see the net carbon gains of the different activities around the hemp life cycle. And it'll also then make it easy to verify at scale. So for example, we're working with Google. We're very excited to be on a Google program called Startups for Sustainable Development, which is giving us one-on-one access with some of the brightest people at Google, as well as ongoing workshops and trainings. It's been a significant game changer for us. And part of that will be potentially the use of the Google Earth engine, which will allow us then to use satellite technology to verify that a hemp crop is growing. So instead
Yeah.
of a person having to go out to a field and say, yes, the hemp crop is growing, we can use generally updated satellite imagery, like potentially on a weekly basis, to actually monitor the crop from start to finish, and then use other different measurements. It could be, for example, if diesel was used in the harvesting of the crop, that then would be measured, and then the amount of diesel would be put into the software, and the software then would remove that amount of emissions generated. So you're talking about the net gains.
Right.
It's called fully considered carbon credits. So yes, we're working with a really exciting pilot project in Kenya. And the beauty of that is that not only is the hemp going to be grown, measured across the entire process, and then most of the fiber going into hempcrete blocks to build sustainable housing locally where it's really, really needed,
Okay.
but also the fiber, the bast fiber, will go towards founding a female-led entrepreneurial business building hemp fabrics. So, there are so many gains, so many benefits coming out of this. And the vision is that by allowing our partner growers in Kenya and all over the world to tap into the carbon credit value, then instantly industrial hemp becomes potentially the most profitable crop they can grow,
Right.
because you've got all the outputs which go into multiple amazing materials, but you've got this foundation income based on, whether that be a corporate buyer or a consumer buyer anywhere in the world who wants to deal with their carbon footprint. So they're literally funding these amazing opportunities and amazing sustainable opportunities all over the world. And so Kenya is just one fantastic example.
Yeah.
I know you're very interested in the project we're working on in Ukraine, Eric. Now, this one is quite mind-blowing, whereby we're partnering with growers who are coming up to planting their hemp crop now over the coming weeks, literally in mined fields, having to dodge missiles
Sure.
and bombs on a daily
Yeah. The
basis.
worst conditions. Yeah.
The worst conditions, but they're still doing it. They're committed to doing it. And the reason they're so committed, Eric, is because they're using the hemp fiber from their crops to produce hempcrete and rebuild
Rebuild their
Ukraine
country.
in
Yep.
real time. So they're building hempcrete apartment blocks, and they're housing internally displaced people from Ukraine and also war orphans. So again, the model we're looking at for that particular project would be that the hemp carbon credit value of what they're doing would essentially fund their operations.
Right.
So again, that's a win-win-win.
Yeah.
And we've got interest from growers and makers all over the world with these amazing projects. So our vision is to really enable all these wonderful projects using the power of industrial hemp.
That's amazing. So a ton of questions just from that answer. So what are the growing conditions like in Kenya? And like what's your acreage like? What are the farmers doing there? Just tell me a little bit about hemp on the ground there.
Yes, the beauty of working in sub-Saharan Africa and other similar locations worldwide is that they're not restricted to a single growing season like many of us in more northern latitudes. Um, so they can potentially grow up to three crops in a
Oh,
year, which
wow.
is quite amazing.
Yeah.
Plus, they have huge land availability. We're potentially going to be partnering with projects in Kenya and in other parts of Africa who could potentially have 1 million acres. But, that's 400,000 hectares like that. And this specific pilot project in Kenya, the problem they had locally was that they were growing corn on the land, but they were unable to make a profit from the corn. Part of the reason is potentially irrigation.
Mm.
And we know that hemp requires potentially 10% of the water that many other crops do. Also, industrial hemp doesn't need herbicides or pesticides.
Right.
It's a very low effort crop, and given the right kind of sunshine, it can grow fantastically well and capture huge volumes of CO2 from the air.
Right.
So essentially, the pilot project is to see, right, can we do this on a small scale, and can we generate more revenues than we would have if we were producing corn?
Right.
If we can prove that, then the local government is ready to pile in and say, right, how many acres do you need?
Okay. So how do you actually quantify hemp's ability to sequester the carbon?
Yes, now we're working on anecdotal evidence at the moment. So, for example, the European Commission uh, has a figure of 15 metric tons of carbon sequestration by industrial hemp per hectare. Now, a lot of that depends on the hemp variety and what
Mhm.
it's being grown for,
Yep.
whether it's for seeds or oils or pure fiber. So there are data points out there which we see as potentially very, very positive. But what we aim to do is to enable data-driven and science-based impact measurement. So one of the main advantages to hemp versus something like forestry, which is kind of the main legacy carbon offset and carbon credit product, is that the hemp fiber can be weighed, okay, in a very short period of time. You're not waiting 30 or 40 years to see a carbon benefit like you would be with a forest.
Right, right.
In 4 months, you can harvest the crop and you can weigh it. And then you can get a very simple, straightforward, inexpensive carbon analysis of the hemp shiv. That's if you decorticate it.
Okay.
At the moment, we're working on a figure of around 44% pure carbon in the dry stalk fiber. So then you're in a situation where you can say, right, this is the amount of carbon that we have captured. We've weighed it. We've verified it independently. There's no holding your finger in the air and coming up with a number. It's essentially science-based and
Okay.
data-driven. And then, of course, you've got the added benefit because through the process of photosynthesis, you've released two oxygen atoms back into the air for each carbon atom that you've captured. So you could potentially then multiply your carbon quantity by 3.77, I believe is the number, to get your CO2 benefit. And then you've got the magic of photosynthesis really multiplying the value of the carbon credit that you would potentially have. And then you're in a very good place. And then, of course, as well as that, depending on what the rest of the crop is used for example, if somebody is using the seeds, the hemp seed oil, to produce biodiesel, which is an amazing fuel because it just drops into existing engines and existing
Right,
infrastructure.
right. Yep.
You're not reinventing the wheel here. You're taking a plant-based fuel and you're not buying fuel from Russia or any of the other
Sure,
nefarious
right,
players in
right.
the fossil fuel market. So if you're using the seeds then to create biodiesel, you've got a displacement of potential emissions that would have been otherwise emitted from the burning of
The
fossil
fossil
fuel
fuels, yeah.
diesel. So we want to be able to measure all of these different gains and bundle them together into a really credible, really trustworthy, and truly transparent carbon credit product.
Right,
And we feel that if we can do that, we can tap into a market that's literally worth trillions of dollars
right.
every year.
So you're measuring the carbon in the plant material. Are then you also measuring the carbon that gets sequestered into the soil? Because from what I understand, that photosynthesis process also
Yes,
puts it into the ground too, right?
yes, absolutely. And that would be chemical analysis. So the roots are potentially a huge amount of biomass. If they're left in the soil, they're sequestering it. Then you've also got the potential for biochar, Eric, which is through a process of pyrolysis, you do this with the dry stalk fiber. And then when that goes back into the ground, that again is essentially sequestering the
Mm-hmm.
carbon for hundreds of years. It's rejuvenating the soil, and you do this on top of the roots. And taking a whole plant approach, the benefits are enormous.
Right,
So what we want to do is to be able to quantify the benefits from the entire plant and the entire process. And we believe that if we can do that using technology to make it really easy for people to achieve these data points, then we feel we will have the most credible carbon credit product in the world.
wow. Um, how much does regenerative agriculture play into your plan here? Because from what I understand, like once you plow the soil again, you're releasing a ton of carbon back into the atmosphere.
You are, and this is the tricky thing about carbon. It wants to combine with oxygen, it's actually designed to want to fill up its shells with the oxygen electrons, and that's why carbon dioxide is such a problem for us. So yes, plowing does release carbon, and that'll combine with oxygen from the air to generate more carbon dioxide. But we still feel that if we can measure that it's still going to be a fraction compared to the net gains we have. And in terms of regenerative agriculture, Eric, I'm sure you are well aware that industrial hemp is one of the great soil rejuvenators and soil cleaners in the world. You don't need fertilizers, you don't need chemicals. The hemp itself actually rejuvenates the soil, which makes it an incredible rotation crop for growers of wheat or other
Sure.
crops.
Yep.
And then depending on the climate, you might be able to grow hemp in the summer and then winter wheat to follow on. So you could potentially get an extra crop benefit in every annual cycle.
Right. Just keep the
And
land
then
in production throughout the year.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yes, indeed. And you're also actually improving the quality of the soil then as well.
Right. Right. You mentioned your work with Google. So how did you get involved in Google's Startup for Sustainable Development program? And, how has being affiliated with Google helped you on your mission?
Yes, it's been hugely significant for us, Eric. I literally just came across the program on social media, and I immediately got very, very excited because Google has such a reputation as being a company that solves huge problems at scale by delivering a great user experience. And I'm a huge fan of Google products, and I'd imagine most of us could not actually get by our daily lives without using one or more Google tools.
Right.
So we immediately submitted to the program, and we went through a process of some online interviews with some of the leaders of the program based in San Francisco and also in Israel, which is where Google Maps is run from, interestingly. Um, and, they immediately bought into the vision we had for hemp and how we could use technology to scale the growth of hemp. And, we're very much on an education journey, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, Eric, because industrial hemp was essentially prohibited in the US in 1937 to benefit the plastics, fossil fuel, and forestry industrialists at the time.
Right.
Um, and Nixon then doubled down on it in the early 70s, and it's only now re-emerging, having been legalized again in
Right.
2018.
It's a
So
beautiful redemption story, right? Everybody
it
loves a
is, it
redemption
is.
story.
I know, yeah, and we want to make a movie of that as well someday, Eric. Maybe you could get some of your Hollywood friends to come our way. Um, but yes, absolutely. There is this great backstory, and we feel that the time is now right. And Google were amazed that, like, they were blown away by the different potential impacts that a single plant could
Right.
have.
Right.
So as people learn more about the vision for what we want to do with the global hemp industry, people buy into it immediately. So essentially, yes, education and information is key. And then once people get what our vision is all about, they immediately become fans.
Yeah.
So we've been on the Google program now since last July. And as part of that program, we were selected with some of the other participants in the program to work with a Netherlands-based impact measurement company, which
Okay.
is working on the program with Google. So we've identified our 5 key impact metrics, which we are going to measure from 2023 through to 2025. And essentially, I can't give you the exact numbers now because I don't have them in front of me,
Okay.
Eric, but we're talking about many hundreds of millions of tons of CO2
Okay.
to be captured and sequestered over 3 years. That's our vision. And Google's assistance in terms of just being able to start conversations, just to say to people, we're working with Google to stop climate change and build a better world. You've immediately got people's
Sure.
attention.
Right.
And then from a logistics perspective, in terms of access to their technologies, access to cloud hosting, and people, most importantly,
Right. Right.
to help us solve problems as problems arise. It's just been absolutely fantastic. And I would strongly recommend anybody who is thinking about a technology startup, which will help to make a difference on any of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, to look for the Google program. It's called Google Startups for Sustainable Development, and see about getting an application in there. Now, our main focus in Hemp Offset and Tao Climate is Goal 13 climate action. But we aim to make a difference across multiple goals,
Right.
everything from gender equality through to sustainable infrastructure and partnerships. But there are huge opportunities for people with purpose-driven enterprises, and to see such a significant company as Google coming in behind all these different
Yeah.
startups
Yep.
that aim to achieve great things is really just fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. So, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, but how much hemp do we need to grow to actually make an impact on carbon in the atmosphere?
Yeah, well, I actually do have a number on this one, Eric, and it's a
Okay.
big number.
Yeah.
It's a very big number. So the UN has calculated the amount of CO2 that we need to take from the air every year between now and the end of this decade if we're to prevent the global temperature rise going above 1.5 degrees Celsius. That is 23 gigatons. Okay, that's 23 billion tons. And if we don't do that, then we're going to be in severe trouble, okay?
So is that 23 gigatons per year?
Per year,
Wow.
yes. It's a
And
very audacious goal,
yeah, it is.
but one that we embrace, Eric.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is probably going to translate if you add up all the carbon benefits on the whole plant approach and bring in your photosynthesis calculations. That's probably going to translate into around 1 billion acres
Billion acres.
per year. But that comes in at a fraction of the amount of agricultural land that's being used for livestock and dairy at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's not really a huge amount of
Right.
land.
We have the space for that.
We have more than enough
Yep.
space.
Yep.
And of course, hemp thrives on marginal land also. So it's not as though we're going to exclude any food production. And of course, even though hemp isn't classified currently as a food source, it is a highly nutritious, incredibly beneficial food source.
You got it.
So, by displacing dairy, we can create proteins, we can create oils that are just as good, if not multiple times better than the legacy, highly toxic and highly emissions intensive food systems.
Right. And as a little side note here, it's sort of one of my pet peeves that you cannot feed hemp grain to livestock. You can feed it to your baby or your grandmother, but it's illegal, at least here in the U.S., to feed
Yes,
commercial livestock herds hemp, which is so crazy. I know there's people working to change that, but
yes.
that's going to crack the markets wide open once we get
It,
that through.
it will, and I'll tell you, we're actually still dealing with these legacy problems going back to the 30s and
Yeah,
going back to the early
right.
70s. So, for example, in Ireland, if somebody wants to grow industrial hemp, they need to get a license from the Department of Health,
Yeah,
which is just crazy. Okay.
yeah,
And then you've got the police coming around saying, well, we need to see your hemp. Like
right.
these people, just they're not qualified
Yeah,
to identify an industrial crop. So then at the UN level, you've got the UN conventions on narcotic drugs, mostly dating from the early 70s, again, the Nixon era. And these make no distinction whatsoever between the cannabis plant, which can be used for medical or recreational purposes, versus the industrial hemp plant.
right,
So what we
right.
want to do, and we've begun lobbying. We do have some contacts at UN level. Um, we're lobbying for the UN to make a change and to specifically exclude industrial hemp varieties from all narcotics conventions. And we feel if the UN takes that action, that will then make it so much easier for national governments worldwide
Right,
to follow that,
right.
and to essentially exclude industrial hemp from all narcotics legislation.
Excellent. All right. So getting back to the carbon in the atmosphere and the 23 gigatons a year that we need to pull out, are we like
Yes.
actively working against ourselves by putting the emissions in? Because we should stop emitting carbon, right? Like how?
Yes. Now, getting to a zero carbon economy is certainly something we need to do. But you know human nature, Eric. We're not going to stop burning gas and fossil fuels until they're all gone. That's just the
I know it's
reality, okay?
sad, but yeah,
I
yeah,
know it's sad, but I think we need to accept that. And also, the emissions gap takes into account the activities of the oceans and also the wilderness and all the existing forestry that we have in the world. They're doing all the heavy lifting. They're absorbing huge volumes of CO2 on a daily basis. So what we need to do is just take out that extra small amount and help nature out. Nature is doing all the hard work.
yeah,
We need to do a little bit. And while 23 gigatons might sound like a lot, um, on a per capita basis, it works out at around 3 tons per person in the world in a year, which is not huge.
yeah.
I think, when we present it like that, it becomes very manageable.
Right. And we have to imagine that we can do it, right? We have to believe
Yes,
that it's possible. And without that belief, we're sort of
yes.
dead in the water. But we're optimists, and we have a beautiful world that we need to, ensure lasts for the rest of our generations, right? So, yeah,
You're absolutely right. And the thing is, besides believing in it, we must do it, Eric, because, for our children and our grandchildren, potentially the world will become a hellscape, if not uninhabitable. And, we owe it to all the living creatures, all of nature on Earth to solve the problem that we
right.
as a species have created.
Created
And
in a
even
very short time, right?
very short
Very
time.
short
Yes,
time.
I know. And I mean, even if you look at things like palm oil and the impact that that's having on the orangutans and all
Hmm.
the other
Hmm.
species in the palm oil plantations, palm oil has found its way into so many foods
Right.
that it's actually shocking. Like, for example, here in Ireland, there's a brand of butter spread, which I won't name, but they claim that this is a traditional butter spread because Ireland is
We
famous for amazing butter.
we get Irish
But
butter here. We That's what we use at home.
very good, yeah, and it is a wonderful
It's like
product. But this
Kerrygold, I think, is what we use
that
at home.
that's the
Yeah.
one. Yes, that's a wonderful brand. But this dairy spread, this butter spread, made in Ireland, and all the packaging traditionally made in Ireland, it contains palm oil, Eric. And that to me
Traditional Irish palm oil, right?
yeah, there you go. All the
Grown
way
in
in from
Kilkenny.
Tunisia. I know. That to me is shocking and it's unnecessary. It's actually unnecessary,
Yeah.
particularly given that hemp oil can do the very same job as palm oil without being shipped across the world
Right.
with a huge
Right.
carbon footprint and without destroying natural habitats and endangering other creatures with whom we share this planet. So it's completely unnecessary.
Right.
And part of the issue is all around supply and demand. It's easy for them to use the
Right.
palm oil. It's cheap for them to
It's
use the palm
short-term
oil.
profits. It's
It's
short-term
short-term
thinking.
profit,
Yep.
no long-term view. They don't care about their kids' futures in 10 or 20 years' time when their shareholders are satisfied with this
Right.
year's profits.
Right.
So we need behavioral change. We need to change how people think, but also by enabling the production of replacement materials, in this case, highly nutritious hemp seed oils, to replace the palm oil. By enabling the supply, then we bring down the price. So it's almost like a chicken and egg
Yep.
situation we're
Yep.
at the moment, where we want to enable vast quantities of supply to help bring down the price and essentially bring everybody along simultaneously. So that's what we're at the moment. But it's a great problem to want to solve.
Right. So here's another problem that I think we need to solve. It's like, how do you get the average person to care? So I try not to be too
Yes.
cynical. I'm an
Mm-hmm.
optimist, I'm a simpleton, but I see like people are so like too distracted by either technology or pop culture or their own like financial difficulties. Like they're just
Mm-hmm.
distracted. So
Yes.
and so no one's not no one. I mean, there are a lot of passionate people who are concerned about this, but it seems like the average, let's say the average American, is not paying attention. So how do you change that narrative? I know you mentioned education before, but
Yes.
how do we get people to care that there's too much carbon up there that we need to pull out?
Yes. I think that's going to require ongoing education and also some marketing. Okay, my own background is in marketing, so we're working on a few different strategies to help cut through the noise, because it's a very noisy world,
Sure.
Eric. I
Yeah.
mean, you've literally just encapsulated there in your description. And it seems we've got a new existential crisis coming along every week. Yeah, it's not just me that
Right.
thinks that.
Right. But there's
Um,
that big existential crisis looming over all of us that's sort of like,
hmm.
yeah.
Yes, you're right. It is the fundamental one, and whatever about all the other crises we're facing, if the planet becomes uninhabitable simply because it's too hot, or it's too dry, or it's too wet, or it's too on fire, or more likely a combination of all these
Yeah.
things
Your
simultaneously,
shareholders are going to be super pissed though if that's what
yeah,
happens, right?
you won't have any customers because
Right.
they'll all be dead.
Yeah.
And Eric, I mean, look at it this way. It's been calculated that if all the planet's ice melts, which is looking increasingly likely, the overall sea levels will rise by 70 meters. Now, 70 meters is a shocking height for the oceans to reach.
Right.
So pretty much every coastal city on the planet is going to be gone.
Right.
And you're going to have people fighting over living on a mountaintop. And
Yep.
guess what? There won't be any crops to feed these people on the mountaintops. So I think, taking that approach and kind of communicating the urgency to an individual. Okay, you feel that you don't need to be concerned about this big picture. Well, actually, you
You do.
do need to be concerned about this big picture because your house is going to be underwater. So that's one of the approaches we'll be taking.
All
But
right.
yes, you're absolutely right. Right, getting through the noise is a difficulty. So hopefully, with some Google tools and Google know-how, we can get into people's daily lives.
Right.
And also, I think the key thing is, as well as talking about the problems, we have to be solutions based and solutions driven, and we want to just make it easy for people. Um, our hemp offset tagline is carbon neutral, made easy. We just want to make it easy.
Yeah.
And if people want to fund carbon credits through hemp growers and makers anywhere in the world, fantastic. If not, we want to make it easy for them to do things like eating less red meat, for example, and show on a calculated basis the impact that very minor lifestyle
Right. Right.
change will have on their individual carbon footprint.
Yeah. So I envision a world where hemp is grown so vastly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like all around the world, and it starts to affect weather patterns and like the jet streams. It's sort of like how they talk about the Amazon rainforest as the lungs of the world, right?
Yes.
Can we do that with hemp? Is that sort of a shared vision? Or are you talking about? Well, yeah, you said like a billion acres would be okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, you're right. Having so much of this fresh biomass growing all over the world, you're right, it will have an effect on the global climate, but we feel it will have a good effect, similar to, as you say, the Amazon rainforest. Because we're burning so much forest and cutting down so many trees, this is actually having an impact on things like the polar vortex,
Sure. Right.
which I know in North America you've been hit very, very badly by these shifts in the climate patterns
Yep.
in recent times. So, as well as the amount of carbon in the air, which I think is the single most important factor in all these radical climate shifts, um, because a warmer atmosphere also holds more water. That's the very simple science
Right. And that
behind
that
climate
makes the
change.
storms more
That
dangerous, more
you're right,
volatile. Yeah.
more energetic. So
Yep.
you've got more energy and you've got more moisture. And then that's on a local level. Then on a global level, because you've got so much water in one part of the world, you've got so much less water in another part of the world. So one half of the world looks like it could be flooded, and the other half of the world looks like it could be arid and drought stricken. And, swinging from one extreme to the other certainly doesn't do the soil any good
Yeah.
either,
Yep.
because when the rains come, it just washes away everything, and it adds extra misery. So yes, we have a utopian vision, Eric. I'm going to be straight with you, where industrial hemp is growing all over the world. and it's being used to build resilient and sustainable infrastructure and housing. And I don't know if many of your audience have actually come across hempcrete,
Oh yeah, yep.
which is you make it with the
The
hemp
herd
shiv
and the lime and the
and
water.
the lime
Hmm.
and some water. But it actually feels like such a lovely material. It's an organic material,
Well, when you walk
you know?
into a hempcrete house, you feel the
Yes.
difference immediately, like
You,
how it breathes, how it sounds, how it feels. So yeah, it's
yeah,
quite a difference.
I haven't had that pleasure, Eric, but I'm looking forward to it. But and then if you look at the benefits in terms of as a construction
Hmm.
material, it's pest resistant, it's mold resistant, it's thermally efficient, it's acoustic resistant. It's got so many
Right.
benefits
Yep.
versus the toxins that come from concrete and cement that you're breathing in every minute of every
Right.
day that
Right.
you're in a concrete built environment.
Yep.
And here's a really interesting partnership we're working on at the moment with a company in the Netherlands. And what they're doing is they're 3D printing replacement coral reefs. They've got a very significant project near Hawaii, actually, which would be a great exploratory research trip to take. I don't
Yeah.
mind saying that.
Let me know when you
But
go. We can
yeah.
meet you there.
Yes. So what they're doing is at the moment they're using waste concrete and they use 3D printers to print out kind of a scaffolding, a
Hmm.
framework, which is then put down and that enables the new coral reefs to grow.
Okay.
So we're working with them to look at using hempcrete instead. So 3D printing these hempcrete
Yeah.
structures,
Yeah.
which will then be put down to enable the regrowth of the reefs. So not only is that turning, the use of a toxic material into a completely sustainable and healthy material, but because they're sequestering that hemp captured carbon at the bottom of the ocean, they then can tap into the carbon credit value of what they're doing, which would potentially fund their operation.
Right. Yeah.
So that's just a wonderful opportunity that we're working on, and we have opportunities from all over the world. They're each so significant in their own way, and it's the co-benefits that really, in our opinion, take him to the next level.
Yeah. Before I ask my next question, you were talking about hempcrete houses. So there in
Yes.
Ireland, you have like the original, sort of the godfather of hempcrete there, Steve Allen. Are you familiar with Steve and his work?
Yes, I actually met Steve at the Hemp Co-op event in Dublin here last
Oh,
year.
good. Okay.
Very, very good guy. I think the issue with Steve and many other people who are doing wonderful things around hemp and hempcrete and construction is that we don't have the supply demand
Right.
dynamic sufficiently
Right.
evolved.
Yep.
So that is one of the problems that we're trying to resolve at the moment. So at the moment, you've got the legacy construction material producers. One of the biggest ones in the world is based out of Ireland. They've had decades of profits and decades of building their infrastructure. So it's very, very hard
Hard to compete.
for hempcrete to compete
Yep.
with that on a financial basis.
Yep.
But things are changing. We are definitely moving in the right direction.
Good. All right. So you said that Tao Climate is sort of the umbrella company, and the hemp
Yes.
offset is the part of the company that the hemp growers are going to be interfacing with.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And anybody who'd like to connect with us can certainly look us up at hempoffset.com. So Hemp Offset is our functional brand where we're building wonderful networks with hemp growers and makers and advocates and ambassadors all over the world. It's really wonderful. So that will be our interface
Okay.
with people actually doing the work. And then Tower Climate, we see that as being the emotional brand where we're offering the way to carbon neutrality. And certainly, while hemp will be the critical component in terms of on that journey with the greatest impacts, we want to be open to all sorts of new technology and nature-based solutions, which will help us achieve that goal of the closing the UN emissions gap.
Okay. So the name Tao Climate, does that have more to do with Chinese philosophy, the absolute principle underlying the universe, or is there an Irish connection? And there I'm thinking of your word for your prime minister, your Taoiseach, because
All
there's a similar
right, yes,
spelling. Is it?
yes.
Tell me
Well,
about it.
it's actually, well, I'll tell you, the Taoiseach is what we call the Prime Minister here, which
Right.
means literally chief. Um, but yes, in answer to your question, we're more inspired by the Asian
Okay.
philosophy of Taoism, which is really all about balance. Okay, and balance is what we aim to achieve. The balance of our relationship with the sun. All life, all energy, everything comes from the sun, which is why the sun has been considered a god by so many
Yeah.
cultures
Sure.
throughout history and even today. So we want to rebalance our relationship with the sun by showing people the way. And I think, at the moment, like we spoke about all the noise and all these existential crises in the world, I think that by showing a clear path and offering up a mechanism towards achieving that balance and achieving that vision of a utopia. And I don't mind using the word utopia. We're in danger of living in a dystopia, Eric. Okay, unless we take some actions. So I think it's up to each of us on an individual human level to say, right, I'm going to take action towards this better world, this vision, and here is a path upon which I can go with a clearly defined goal, a clearly defined vision at the end of it, and here are measurable impacts that I can make along the way.
Excellent. I love that. And for people who don't understand why I asked the question about the Taoiseach, is because there's a similar spelling. That word
The
starts with
TAO,
Tao.
yes.
Yeah.
And there could be a relationship back in the mists of time,
Oh,
Eric. And I think, when you look back, even from an industrial hemp perspective, industrial hemp is humankind's oldest cultivated crop,
sure.
okay, going back many thousands of years, even before wheat. Um, so we had this almost a symbiotic relationship as a
Yeah.
species
Right.
with hemp,
Right.
and we have had this for millennia. So we feel that by enabling a return to this relationship with the plant, which can deliver so many positive benefits to everybody in the world, financial benefits, health benefits, um, infrastructure benefits, and then the final great benefit is ending climate change and saving our species and saving the entire natural world. That's a great place for us to work to get to,
Yeah.
and we feel we're on the right path.
Yeah. So how, like for you personally, how did you get to hemp? Like, were you always a hemp advocate, or did you have like an aha moment at some point?
Well, actually, there are two elements that, yes, I've always had an interest in it. I read The Emperor Wears No Clothes, the Jack
Sure
Herrer
do.
book,
Yep.
which
Yep.
is kind of mind blowing. And then about 20 years ago or so, or a little bit more, I was working in the media magazine publishing here in Dublin, and one invitation I got was to attend a launch of the Body Shop. Do you know the Body Shop, the
Mm-mm.
ethical beauty brand?
Oh,
It was
okay.
started by a woman from England called Anita Roddick, who built this huge global brand called the Body Shop. And essentially, she invented ethical consumerism in the 90s primarily. And I had an invitation to go and see her. So I said, right, I'll go and meet this lady who turned out to be just an incredibly dynamic, exciting, interesting person. She was fantastic. I would put her up as, one of my most admired
Oh, wow.
people in business, absolutely.
Say her name
But it
again.
turned out Anita Roddick is her name. Roddick, from the Body Shop. It turned out she was launching a range of hemp beauty products, soaps and moisturizers, and it was like this is my first time really seeing hemp products in the flesh.
Okay.
It was quite a radical thing
Yeah.
around there, the turn of the century. So that kind of turned me on to it. And of course, her enthusiasm was quite infectious, and it turned into a very successful product line for the company. And then more recently, I'd been working in technology, Irish software companies, American tech companies for a number of years. And then what came along was Elon Musk's X Prize carbon removal contest
Sure.
was launched there a couple of years ago. So I had a look at that and I thought, wow, Elon Musk, he's putting $100 million of his own money into this contest. It's the biggest prize contest in human history,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is pretty radical. And essentially, what he's looking for is a new magic box that will magically take all the CO2 from the air
It's
and get
called
rid of it.
photosynthesis, right?
Yes,
We have it
exactly.
already.
Yeah, I know. But looking at that, I was thought, hang on now. I know that there is this plant called industrial hemp which can capture huge amounts of CO2. Looking into the X Prize project detail, and a key criteria was that you have to permanently sequester the carbon captured for 100 years or more. So then I got to thinking about hempcrete and how if we could join the growing of the hemp plant with the production of hempcrete, bring them together, then we could have a very coherent and powerful project proposal.
Right.
So that's what we did.
Yeah.
So I left my job in technology marketing, founded Hemp Offset, and since then we've also created the Tao Climate brand. And we got our proposal into the X Prize carbon removal, and we are actually one of only 300 projects worldwide to have gotten through their milestone requirements,
Hmm.
which was about this time last year.
Right.
And what that was they've had their experts review our plans and say that our plan to get to megaton and gigaton carbon removal scale is valid. So we have an infrastructure model that we'd like to be able to deploy once we prove it initially with our first few pilot projects, so that we can scale up production quite rapidly. So we can say, right, this is what works. These are the measurements that you're trying to attain, and then we can scale up quite rapidly anywhere in the world.
Right.
So it's been really, really significant to us from that perspective in terms of bringing joined up thinking into what we're doing. So I'd say that has been very instrumental in getting us to where we are now.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Google program came on after that. So since then, we've been making very quick progress. And the thing is, Eric, we need to make quick progress.
We don't have a lot of time.
The
Yeah.
time for action is yesterday.
Yeah.
It's like the old Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree was
20
20
years
years
ago.
ago.
Yeah.
The second best time is today. So today is the
Get
day
on
we
it.
need to
Yep.
get the hemp in the ground.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's amazing. Just talking about the hempcrete and what it could do. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with a project here in Pennsylvania. It's actually called the Project PA Hemp Home. So it's out in Western Pennsylvania and sort of a proof of concept. There's a company out there called Dawn Services, and they provide housing to at-risk people or veterans, things like that. But they wanted to like refurbish a house like in small town America, and take out the old poisonous stuff that it was built with, and redo it with hempcrete. So they grew hemp in this like surrounding farms, and they actually use that hemp for hemp wood flooring, but they brought in hemp herds probably from France. But they did this thing, and they showed that you could completely redo a house using hempcrete. You could grow it locally, you could process it locally, and we could just revitalize small town rural America. And it just gives me hope to
Fantastic.
see folks
Yes.
doing this.
Yes, and that actually reminds me of, with the energy crisis which we've had this past year in terms of retrofitting houses with thermal insulation. Of course, hemp thermal insulation material is as good as it gets.
Yeah,
And as you say, it can be grown and produced locally
locally.
instead of being carted around the world. And guess what? It's actually good for your health as opposed to poisoning you.
Right, right.
So you're absolutely right. So every one of these pilot projects or people trying new ways to solve these problems with the power of industrial hemp, these need to be celebrated. and they need to be shown to the world that yes, there is a better way, and it's time to embrace this better way.
Yeah. Are you familiar with any of the research around renewable natural gas when it comes to hemp?
Yes, absolutely. The the thermal abilities in terms of power production of any execution of the hemp
Yeah.
biomass are comparable with coal, certainly oil and gas also. We just need the will, Eric. We
We need
just
the
need the
will.
will. And the fact is that instead of relying on fossil fuels coming in from nefarious regimes on the other side of the world, the fact that we can just take a small portion of our land and grow our own
Yeah.
fuels. It's quite incredible.
Yeah.
So when you go back to the emperor wearing no clothes, we literally have to overcome many decades of fossil fuel wealth being used to buy the media, to buy journalists, to buy politicians. And we
Governments.
need
Yeah.
to call it out for what it is,
Yep.
Eric.
Yep.
The reason there is such inertia in the power centers of the world is because they've all been bribed
Yeah.
to stay quiet and to stay on side
Right.
promoting fossil fuels.
Yep.
So we need to call them out and we need to show that there is a better way.
And these fossil fuel companies, they've known about climate change for 50 years, right? Or
Yes, I
more. Like
know.
they knew
Yeah,
about
yeah,
this.
I know.
It's
And you
maddening.
say, how can they get away with it? Oh, because the media is owned by them and the politicians are owned by them. That's how they can get away with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. We need a new paradigm, right? We need to
Yes,
be living in,
yes,
in the new age, and
yeah.
hemp is one of the
It
ways, right?
it is. It's the key tool
Yeah.
in our opinion. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what are the next steps for you at Dow Climate?
Yes, so we're currently fundraising. So, if any listeners are looking for a wonderful investment, a technology investment that's actually going to change the world and save the world by enabling multiple wonderful industries and opportunities worldwide, please get in touch. We're literally at the moment, we're building out the MVP of our software platform. MVP is minimum viable product or minimum valuable product from a software perspective. So our ambition is that by certainly the middle of this year, our platform will be available for buyers to come on board and to register their intent in terms of growing crops, and then makers to come on and register their intent in terms of making products from the crops. Then we'll bring them together on the platform, and that's where the magic happens, and take these carbon credits to market at scale. But we're open already. We if you want to join the platform and to make your hemp crops or products available for sale, please contact us at hempoffset.com and we will certainly help you get to market before our platform is ready for prime time. And essentially, let's get the conversation started.
All
So
right.
those are our two ambitions: fundraising, which building technology, building software is expensive, Eric, as I'm sure you know. But as well as that, we need to invest heavily in telling our story and really communicating on a global level that yes, there is a better way, and here is the better way. So fundraising, building technology, and bringing growers and makers together so that we can get massive inventory. Doing all these things simultaneously, it's very exciting.
It's like the world has all of these problems, right? And
Yes,
we can
yes.
farm our way out of most of them, I think, right? Through industrial hemp.
Yes, and the thing is, it's a green way to do things. It's literally and metaphorically green. And I think it's giving the power back to people so that, we're not running an economy or we're not running a lifestyle based on the decisions that are taken on the other side of the world. And if somebody decides to start a war, then that impacts us and our lifestyle. When we can actually displace and replace all these fossil fuel produced products, everything from gasoline and diesel, all the way to the plastic. I mean, we didn't even touch on bioplastics, Eric, and the fact that hemp bioplastic can replace all the fossil fuel-based plastics we use every single day. And then when it gets into the ocean, not only does it not kill all ocean life, but the fish can actually eat it. I mean, are you telling me that's not a win-win-win? But the problem is that people like Saudi Arabia, they made a specific choice recently when they saw the rise of electric cars.
Yeah.
They made a specific choice, right? We're going to shift our production away from producing gasoline for American cars and other cars, and we're going to aim more towards producing plastic. So now we've ended up in a situation where the oceans are literally suffocating and choking to death on plastic waste. And that was a specific business decision that the oil producers took.
Right.
So we said, no, that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable.
Oh.
And there is a better way.
Yeah.
And hemp bioplastic is potentially the answer.
Right. I think about, how much money there is in the world right now, probably like more wealth than has ever been around. Right. And you've got all these billionaires, like you mentioned Elon Musk or,
Yes.
the guy at Microsoft, like they could make business decisions now, today, policy decisions that would just change everything almost overnight, like could start an industry overnight. Like let's say Elon Musk was like, I'm going to pay farmers, $1,000 an acre to grow hemp. And then we could just start growing it and stockpiling it and then letting the entrepreneurs figure out what to do with it.
Yes, that's exactly our vision, Eric. And so by enabling the production at scale, we want to then take this inventory, this massive production capabilities, and get these big backers. We want to get the big tech companies. We want to get the big food producers. We want to get the big
paper companies.
Company. I mean, the thing is, anything that can be made from forestry or fossil fuels
can be made from hemp.
Can be made from hemp.
Yep.
And also the airlines, for example, would be another key market for us. So yes, we want to be able to present the solution to these companies at scale so that they can say, yes, this is not just some greenwashing exercise here. This is something that can actually make a huge, significant impact. And that's our vision, is to bring them on the journey.
I love it. It's next level. It's paradigm shifting. It's the way we need to go. So the way, yes.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Gary Byrnes, it is great to talk to you. And I'm just really impressed what you're up to. We'll say it again. Your website is hempoffset.com. People can go there for more information. The sort of umbrella company is Tao Climate, Tao Climate. And is there anything else you want people to know before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I really want to thank you for your time, Eric. This has been really enjoyable and interesting. And I know you're doing a great job in spreading the word. And I think the most important thing is we need to give people hope that, yes, there is a better way. It is possible to make the world a better place, and we want to help show the way. So absolutely, I think I'm also a big believer in the butterfly effect, where, if we take a small action today, it could be something like cutting our carbon footprint for one day. That could actually have the effect of preventing a hurricane, And so if we can make these small impacts, and then through our own network, get a network effect going, I think in time we can add up all our impacts and literally make a significant impact and also build a better world.
Amen to that. Thank you, Gary Byrnes.
Thanks, Eric.
All right, so there you go. Gary from Tao Climate. How about that? Sounds like they're off to a great start. You can learn more about what they're doing at taoclimate.com. That's taoclimate.com or hempoffset.com. I'll have those links on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com, so you can go there and click on them. All right, so a couple of updates. First thing is that I mentioned this before, but next week is the NOCO Hemp Expo, and I'm going to be out there. I'm going to be there for a few days. I'm actually going to be emceeing one of the panel discussions Thursday morning, so hope to see you there. If you want to meet up with me out there in Colorado Springs, just the best way to do that is to send me an email. Send it to podcast@lancasterfarming.com, and I'll get it right on my phone. So I really look forward to connecting with listeners and to the people in the hemp industry, the people that Ken Elliott calls the movers and the shakers. So I know you're all going to be there in Colorado next week, and I'm looking forward to being there with you. All right, second thing is, in the sponsor message in the beginning, I mentioned the Hempcrete workshop, May 6th and 7th. I'm going to have more information about that workshop on next week's show. All right, so stay tuned for that. So anyway, those are the updates. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Do you need any more proof of that? More than this podcast? Because what other agricultural newspaper has dedicated an entire weekly podcast to covering the emerging hemp industry? Yeah, nobody except Lancaster Farming. So check us out online, lancasterfarming.com. All right, so that does it for me. I got to get out of here. Until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper.
Industrial hemp.
This is the way.
Industrial hemp.
This is the way.
Industrial hemp.
This is the way.
Season 3, Episode 9 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2023 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, which is part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited and produced by Eric Herlock, and the music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tim Bird Shadow.